Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Bloom with Roofing Contractor, and welcome to the Best of Success podcast show. It's always a great day when we have some time to spend with Trent Cotney, partner of Adams and Race. Trent, great to see you, and thanks for joining me.
Joe, thanks for having me.
Well, Trent, it sounds like there's a lot to unpack with that great country just north of us, Canada. So, where do we even start? Let's
Yeah,
start with wildfires.
sure. Yeah. I mean, you can't turn on the news without seeing, the haze that's been around a lot of the Northeast cities, Chicago, throughout the, Midwest, close to the border there, and it's causing a lot of issues. Obviously, the particulates, the air quality is really bad, right? And it creates a variety of safety issues for construction workers, regardless of what trade, if you're working outdoors. So what's interesting is, you need to understand that a lot of the PPE that you would normally be your go-to isn't necessarily going to work in all situations. So, the first thought is, hey, if I see smoke or, stuff like that, if this were, for example, California was wildfire smoke, right? The thought is, well, let me pull out a, N95 or something like that. But, you and I were talking right before this, that N95 isn't going to catch the small size of the particulates that are contained within this wildfire smoke. Now, look, over time it does disperse, and it is possible that it's not as bad by the time it gets to you. But really, if you're looking to avoid that, the best thing to do is either stay inside, maybe look for a respirator or something a little bit more robust than an N95. The key thing is you don't want to expose your employees to prolonged periods of being out there, right?
Right.
If you already have existing conditions, whether they're heart issues or lung issues or anything else that's going to be severely exacerbated. And one of the things I can tell you just from my own personal experience walking around Chicago last week,
Mhm.
there's an immediate reaction where you feel congested, your eyes hurt, all that kind of stuff. But I'm still not 100%, right? And that's just from walking 15 minutes here or there, and I still feel a little bit off from that. So it's very dangerous, and it's the best thing that you can do is stay indoors. If you got to be outside, make sure that you are doing your best to flush eyes, make sure that you've got the right respiratory protection program in place, and that you're watching your workers closely.
Yeah, for sure. So, Trent, we've talked in the past about clauses and contracts that need to be put in place, especially if it's, before we were talking about pests like wasps or snakes or rodents or whatever it might be might be on a roof, but we really didn't talk about something like this.
Yeah.
Would this fall into that clause that if you need to stand down for something?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's life safety issues here, but there's probably contractual triggers that you could also use. So, I think of act of God or force majeure. You've got, a wildfire in Canada causing smoke to come down to the United States and affect, the air quality. That's clearly unforeseen, right? That's something
Right.
that you would never have been able to predict. And I think there's usually either a contractual mechanism or even outside the contract, there's usually case law that supports the fact that you're entitled to additional time. It might not give you, cost, right? You might not be able to claim
Sure.
delay cost, but you can clearly say, look, this is an unsafe condition. My workers can't work in this. Some of the stuff blew through pretty quick. So, that's what I would say is let's stand down for a day or two and then we'll come back. And do it that way. So yeah, I think there usually is some kind of contractual mechanism that'll allow you to seek that additional time.
Yeah, no, for sure. Nothing better than keeping your workers safe for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Trent, the other big thing that blew up just recently, I think it was last night, were just the tariffs from Canada. So continuing on with more information happening out of Canada. What happened and what does everybody need to know?
Yeah, so last night the Trump administration announced a 50% tariff on a lot of different Canadian imports. And this obviously impacts the construction industry. If you bid a project with certain
Huge.
margins or, have priced materials in advance of this, it could potentially affect that. So here's what everybody needs to know. The tariffs don't take effect until August 19th. So there's basically a 30-day, waiting period. And it doesn't affect every type of construction material. There are certain things that are exempted. So, for example, if you were subject to section, what is it, 232 tariffs, things like steel and aluminum and copper, that's exempted from this. There are certain critical minerals that are exempted, energy products, those types of things. But to me, the one thing that kind of stood out to me is that cement is affected. So if you're doing, any type of, walls and ceilings work that involves cement or structural work, highways, infrastructure, multifamily, that kind of stuff, any of that kind of stuff is going to be impacted by this. Now, Jill, the one thing I will say is, the knee jerk reaction is to panic. But I will tell you that we've got 30 days, a little bit less than 30 days, and it's likely that additional negotiations will happen, or there will be carve outs, or just like we've seen in the past, this is being used to exact or affect change. So I'm not confident that all of this will come to fruition 30 days from now. But the one thing I would tell any contractor listening to this is that if you're bidding new work, please make sure you've got at least two provisions in your contract. One, price escalation or price acceleration provision that allows you to get paid in instances like this, right? It will say if, material line items go up by more than 5%, that you're entitled to an adjustment of the contract. The other thing I would say is get a material substitution clause in there, because if for some reason, you're importing cement or something from Canada and it's, up 50%, you might be able to get that, source it locally or use a different material that would comply. So those are two of the most critical things that I recommend in your contract. If you've already got an existing contract that's out there, I would go ahead and flag it. I would send it to the owner's rep or the design professional saying, look, this is what we've got. This may affect our ability to, get these materials, and the prices are going up. How are we dealing with this? And based on how your contract is worded, they may respond pound sand, you're going to eat it. But I would rather get that information out there and see whether or not, everybody can put their heads together to figure out how to resolve it. It's a big issue. This has been a big issue since January 2025. Tariffs, I understand the desire to use them for, economic incentives and things of that nature. But from an industry standpoint, the industry depends on stability. So we need to understand what the game is, and that game needs to be consistent throughout, especially in commercial construction, because there are long wait periods, right? You might bid a project, but you might not start that project for a few months, and then it may go on for years, right? It's not like residential projects where usually you're in and out in a shorter period of time. Stability is a good thing. So, I'll remain cautiously optimistic. We'll wait and see what happens, but clearly this is going to continue. I think the use of tariffs will continue. Prepare yourself with the contract provisions that I mentioned.
Yeah, sounds great. Great insight, Trent. And it seems like a lot of the tariffs that were put into place from a while ago, it felt like it was a little bit more of a fear factor. And I guess it's hard to predict, but I'm going to ask you to predict what's the likeliness that this is actually going to stick and it's actually going to go into effect. And if it does, it seems like it's probably going to be short term anyway.
Yeah. So this is done under Section 338, and I think that you will see a significant scaling back. I think it's used for negotiating purposes. Obviously, Canada is a big trade partner. We share a border.
Yeah.
Things like this have happened in the past, so I don't necessarily think it will. Is it possible that some form of this will remain? Yeah, but I think it'll be scaled back, and I think you'll start seeing a little bit of a difference in what ultimately comes out 30 days from now. The one thing I will say is be prepared. We haven't, I don't think the industry saw too much of an impact other than, I saw it, especially in structural steel, some metal coil, things like that, occasional equipment purchases I saw go up, not a huge impact, but all it takes is the right project and the right piece of equipment or whatever it is, and it could ruin your day. So I
Yeah.
believe just be proactive, stay prepared, watch your contracts, and make sure you're addressing it on bid docs.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for your insight as always, Trent. And if anybody has any questions, how do they find you?
Sure, they can email me, trent.cotney@arlaw.com, or anywhere social at Trent Cotney.
Very good. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for all our free content, follow us on our social media channels, and most importantly, stay safe and healthy. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Trent.
Thank you.